This is Due South on WUNC News. I'm Jeff Tiberii. As a war with Iran rages on, casualties, one of which touches home.
The remains of fallen service members being returned to the United States.
Two of those fallen American troops were stationed at Fort Bragg. President Trump attending the dignified transfer for First Lieutenant Tyler Feehan and Sergeant Michael Swinton at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware.
This hour, we'll get updates on happenings in D.C. and in North Carolina as part of our Friday News Roundup. We'll also turn to plans for a new ICE detention facility in rural NC.
We have to remember, this is a predominantly black, heavily Democratic county. Plenty of folks do not like what ICE has been doing, especially recently.
All those stories, plus it's somehow football season. Due South begins after the news. From the studios of WUNC News in Chapel Hill, this is Due South. Glad to have you tuned in to our North Carolina Friday News Roundup. I'm Jeff Tiberii. Plenty to get to from Capitol Hill to Jones Street and plenty of other outposts across the Old North State. We'll introduce you to our panelists in just a moment. First, some sounds of the week.
6 counties have moved from the worst drought category to the second worst, including Orange and Durham.
2 Charlotte women are seeking damages from the federal government after they say Customs and Border Patrol agents unlawfully detained them during Operation Charlotte's Web last November.
Right now at 5, the military is investigating the death of Sergeant Michael Swinton. The Fort Bragg soldier grew up in Fayetteville, and he died during a controlled detonation of an Iranian drone.
The budget provision was part of the Dominique Moody Safety Act that passed the House unanimously. The new child welfare safeguards are named after a 6-year-old in Charlotte who died from abuse and neglect in a relative's home.
The new budget says that any local government efforts to, quote, agree to or comply with minority or women-owned business enterprise participation requirements is hereby repealed.
With us for the hour, taking you up to 1 o'clock and embodied here on WUNC News, are Danielle Battaglia, congressional impact reporter at the News and Observer and Charlotte Observer. Zachery Eanes is a journalist, reporter with Axios Raleigh. Ely Portillo is on the line. He's executive editor at WFAE, Charlotte's NPR member station. And also here with us in studio, last, never least, Colin Campbell, Capitol Bureau Chief at WUNC News. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Jeff. How's it going?
Hi.
It's going all right. Thanks for asking. Later this hour, Eduardo Medina of the New York Times joins us. He covers the American South, and he published a notable ICE-related story this week. If you have any questions for our panelists or comments for our discussion, please send them along to our inbox, duesouth@WUNC.org. All right, let's begin with Tyler James Feehan, first lieutenant who was killed Saturday in the nation of Jordan. The Fort Bragg-based soldier was just 25. His remains were returned to the U.S. this week in a flag-draped casket. Danielle, you wrote about the departed. Tell us more.
I did. So there were 2 actually connected to North Carolina, First Lieutenant Tyler Feehan and then Sergeant Michael E. Swinton, who is from Fayetteville or lived in Fayetteville. And they both were killed and brought back to the United States this week. Swinton died in a controlled detonation of a downed Iranian drone, and Feehan had died in enemy fire or an enemy attack in northern Iran and Iraq. And so we had a dignified transfer of their bodies this week in Dover, Delaware, and 3 of our lawmakers came and witnessed that dignified transfer. So we saw Senator Tillis there, Senator Budd, and Representative David Rouser, whose district goes right up to Fort Bragg, but isn't actually in Fort Bragg.
This is a wildly, perhaps ignorant question to ask off the top. I don't remember we have had Fort Bragg-based casualties, but there just seemed to be a different tone about this one. And if that's just me, you can be like, "That was just you, dude." But was there something different about this? Was there? I mean, this moment at Dover, the moment with a notable chunk of the congressional delegation. There obviously have not been, fortunately, a lot of casualties here in the last 5 months. So, and maybe that's why this one rose.
I think that rose. I think a lot of times we aren't seeing and I could be ignorant on this, but I feel like the deaths that we see from Fort Bragg have been in practices and not at
Training,
war.
yeah.
And I don't want to say that for sure because it's not like I'm tracking this on the regular, but I feel like that made it different. We are at war with Iran right now, and there were actually 4 members who were killed, of our service members who were killed, and all of them were brought back to Dover. And, the president was there. Pete Hegseth, our Department of Defense secretary, was there. General Kane was there. So we had, this got attention because of the high-profile nature of both the deaths and who was there to get their bodies back to America.
And as we heard in the montage just a moment ago, Tyler James Feehan, born and raised in North Carolina, a Fayetteville native, of course, Fort Bragg, this massive military installation which houses and homes so many soldiers from across the country. But this was a homegrown soldier who did die on Saturday at the age I mentioned of 25. Due South Friday News Roundup here on WUNC News. We're going to turn away from the war. We're going to touch on energy here. Duke Energy has been seeking a rate increase for a while. This week, the terms of what they were asking for changed. Why, and what's the new request?
Yeah, obviously Duke Energy is sort of the monopoly supplier of electricity for the vast majority of North Carolinians, and because of that, the rates they set for customers it's done through a highly regulated process where they have to file every so often a request to the North Carolina Utilities Commission to
which is like a 7-member appointed board.
I think it's 5 now.
Is it 5 now? Okay. What was 7?
Yes, and the Utilities Commission will ultimately, after evidentiary finding, after hearing from the public, after hearing from experts, will come to an agreement on a rate. Anyways, part of this, Duke can actually come to a settlement with NC Public Staff, which is a part of this agency. And so the settlement, they kind of came together and they said, instead of requesting 18% for residential customers, which has really become a flashpoint in North Carolina politics in a lot of ways. It's come up in every election, basically candidates being asked, do you support Duke Energy's request? Right. All the way to protesters filling up, all of these public hearings, basically, saying like, hey, we're already being, inflation has already hit consumers so hard, like we cannot stand an 18% raise. And so I think Duke Energy has sort of seen some of that response and has come to this settlement that they are only going to request a 9% raise over 2 years. And a lot of co-signers have signed on to the settlement, everyone from like Walmart to the NC Sustainability Association. So it has some there is a wide group of people who are saying that this is a more reasonable request. But at the same time, now Governor Stein, Attorney General Jeff Jackson have come out and said that they are not satisfied with this settlement still, and they want to see more protection done around data centers.
Well, yeah, right. So there's the data center piece of it. I also just want to ask about the multi-billion-dollar elephant in the room, which is the fact that Duke, I believe it's not right here in front of me, but I believe it was like $4.8 billion in profit that they had in 2025. And earlier this year, they saw record profits in the first quarter, upwards of like $1.6 billion. So how have they squared, or what is the messaging of like, well, we're reducing from 18 to 9, and that makes sense even though we've still got this.
Yeah, I think their messaging has been pretty consistent throughout, is that they are paying for upgrades to the grid, whether that's self-healing technology like this, systems that like are better able to withstand power outages, or even starting to go down the road of building nuclear power plants and stuff. And everything that they've done with the General Assembly over the past few years has been around like, how can we make these investments more have a suitable return for our, people, our share owners. Right. And so that's really where it's come down to. But I think, like you said, we're at a time period where residents don't necessarily care about Duke Energy's profits, right? They see that gas is up. Right. They see that their groceries are up, and like all of a sudden, is a $300 a month bill during July? How sustainable is that for them? And so I think Duke Energy is paying for a lot of stuff. Yeah. But, it's like, what is that rate
What's
of
balance?
return
What's
they
the
deserve?
fair?
And that's really where all this
Yeah.
argument comes down to,
Right.
and this regulated process.
All right. No imminent decision coming here. We'll obviously keep our ears on this one. Coming up on a break here in a couple of minutes, but let us first turn to Ely Portillo, who joins us from Charlotte. This week in the race to replace U.S. Senator Thom Tillis, both major party candidates found themselves in Gastonia. What of note did they have to say or do?
Yeah, so Roy Cooper and Michael Whatley were both pitching voters and trying to rally some support just west of Charlotte here. I think one notable thing that our political correspondent, Steve Harrison, noted was that in addition to the talking points we've all kind of gotten used to, Cooper saying Whatley is a Trump stooge and Whatley saying Cooper wasn't tough on crime, things we've heard before. Whatley was really kind of playing an interesting tightrope dance of trying to embrace some of Trump's policies, but barely mentioning Trump. In his event, the president's name only came up once, I believe, and one notable detail from Steve Harrison was that there was only one red MAGA hat in the whole crowd, which was a notable change from when Whatley launched his campaign last year. And, he's in a general election, not a primary now, but we've tracked some of the mentions of his names and just found he's talking about the president a lot less as he's trying to win a general election and the president's popularity is lower.
Interesting. Colin, let me get you in here briefly before the break. If you have a read on this, are we going to see Donald Trump a lot less in North Carolina in 2026 than we have in previous election cycles?
I think he's probably still going to show up to kind of rally the base. I mean, the challenge for Republicans this cycle is going to be turnout, and Trump is still popular with the Republican base. So I think Whatley's going to sort of thread this needle a little bit. He may not mention him as much in coverage that where the media is present, and he may not distance himself from the president's policies. But if you want to have a big rally in North Carolina, you probably want the president to show up for your Republican rally.
Was that a crazy question I just asked? Is the president going to be here less?
I mean, we have seen him less in recent months, but I expect to see him. I think Colin's right.
One of the most relevant and important U.S. Senate battleground races taking place here in North Carolina, along with Maine and Texas, and the other ones as well. We're just getting started here on the North Carolina Friday News Roundup on Due South. Still ahead this hour, we'll chat about the state budget and whether or not employees have yet received those raises and bonuses. But immediately next, we turn our attention to a newly planned ICE facility in Northeast North Carolina. That's ahead. This is Due South on WUNC News. Welcome back to the Friday News Roundup on Due South. I'm Jeff Tiberii. 163 years ago this week, Potter's Raid, an American Civil War effort in eastern North Carolina. Brigadier General Edward Elmer Potter departed New Bern and a Union fortification to lead an expedition of destruction. Potter and his men first looted Greenville. They burned the Tar River Bridge, then went farther inland. Some troops destroyed a Confederate ironclad under construction in Tarboro, while another faction wreaked havoc in Rocky Mount, a key logistical city for the South. Rocky Mount was home to the largest cotton mill in the state, which produced uniforms, among other war necessities. Also in Rocky Mount, a bridge over which the Wilmington and Weldon Railroad crossed. The soldiers ignited multiple bridges, ransacked farms and personal property, as they made off with tens of thousands of dollars in cash and bonds. Potter's raid was a Union success. It cut off some Confederate lines of communication and destroyed significant quantities of supplies. By the time General Potter and company returned to New Bern, they did so with 100 Confederate prisoners, 300 formerly enslaved people who had fled, and several hundred horses and mules. We do history each Friday, 20 minutes into our program. If you ever have a nugget for us to consider, please share it at WUNC.org. All right, let's stay in eastern North Carolina with a much different story. We learned this week that the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency, ICE, plans to open a massive detention center in Hertford County. That's about 2 hours northeast of downtown Raleigh, just for context. The New York Times obtained internal documents laying out the plan. We welcome now to the Due South, North Carolina Friday News Roundup one of the reporters behind the story, Eduardo Medina, who covers the South for the Times. Eduardo, welcome back to Due South.
Hey, thank you so much. Good to be back.
Glad you're here with us. Okay, tell us more, please, about these plans. Who is ICE partnering with, and how many people do they ultimately plan to place in this facility?
Yeah, sure. It's a good place to start. So ICE is going to be partnering with, it seems, with Geo Group. They're one of the largest private prison networks in the country, and they're going to be opening up a detention center in Rivers facility. This is a facility that has been closed since 2021, and it is probably going to house about 1,400 people. They have the capacity for 1,400 beds. So it's pretty big. It's pretty sizable.
This area is in a so-called detention desert. I've read that ICE had previously purchased several warehouses with the potential to convert those spaces for people. Do we know if those plans have now been abandoned? How does that factor in here?
Yes, it's a great question. My colleague Hamed actually broke the story showing that a lot of these warehouses that they bought, maybe some of your listeners will remember that ICE was buying all these warehouses around the country or planning on using them to house migrant detainees. And Hamed's reporting shows that they sort of traced back from that plan. They sold it, or they're wanting to sell a lot of these warehouses that they bought for $700 million. And what this shows is that they're kind of pivoting. I mean, this Rivers facility signals that they're more open to partner with private prisons, that it's maybe more convenient. This facility has been sitting there unused for a few years, and so I think they see it as an easy layup to just get this thing going in a place where, there really hasn't been any detention centers in North Carolina at this scale.
Right.
Normally, a lot of folks are taken further south or elsewhere in the country.
All right. Now, Hertford County is a disproportionately poor region, area, county. I suspect there is a jobs argument that some will make here. What did local leaders or residents have to say about this proposed facility? Good or bad, or I suppose something else?
Yeah, totally. So, gosh, I mean, that part of our state, Eastern North Carolina, especially in Hertford County, it is very rural, and they've been struggling to bring in decent, high-paying jobs for a while now. And so when this facility closed in 2021, it was a big deal to folks who were working there, right? It was about 200 or 300 jobs, from what I'm told, and the prospect of it returning would mean a lot for folks. That is, if they are indeed hired, right? I mean, we don't know yet who Geo Group and ICE will hire for this. Will it be locals? Will it be people from somewhere else? That part remains unclear. And it is presumably going to be another 200 or 300 jobs, one would think, if it's going to be the same size as it was back when it was open as a private federal prison. So that is on top of mind for folks. And yet, I think plenty of other folks in town, we have to remember, this is a predominantly Black, heavily Democratic county. Plenty of folks do not like what ICE has been doing, especially recently. And they see this agency as extremely plagued and something that will only cause more troubles than do good. And they also question the quality of these jobs because this facility has a history of problems in its past.
Eduardo Medina of the New York Times with us here on the Due South Friday North Carolina News Roundup. Now, I'm going to ask this. This might just be a throwaway here, Eduardo, but we've got a different news brief in the hour today about how more than a third of North Carolina jails have exceeded capacity this year. That's over here on one side. It's seemingly unrelated, but you're telling us that there's this facility that has 1,400 beds and has been closed for quite some time. Why has this facility been closed, and for how long?
Yeah, you're touching on something that's sort of wrapped into all this, right? So, yeah, lots of jails are struggling with capacity. Lots of state prisons are struggling with finding employees. I'll give you one example that I didn't include in the story, but I think it's pretty relevant. In Alamance County, they had been partnering with ICE. Their sheriff there had been partnering with ICE for a while and keeping migrants in their detention center in their jail. It wasn't 1,400 immigrants. There was on a different scale, but nonetheless, they were still keeping people there. And so what happened is that after the legislature passed a law last year that will essentially keep more people in jail for longer, this sheriff in Alamance County basically said, well, we don't have the capacity for migrants anymore. And so going back to Rivers facility, this was always a private federal prison, or at least it had been back when it was open in 2021. And so it never really factored into the equation with jails, but it does factor into the equation with are they going to find enough people to work at this place? Because everyone has been struggling with that. Every facility has been struggling with that.
Formerly the Rivers Correctional Institution, it is under private ownership, and it is now being planned for a detention facility for ICE. What is the timeline here, Eduardo? When can we expect this facility to open and start housing migrant individuals?
Yes, that's a great question and something we wanted to know. So the document tells us that ICE's plan is to have this thing operating by the end of the year, by December. But we spoke to a state official familiar with internal planning, and this person said that it may be open as soon as late September. So either way, I think we're looking at this thing being open pretty soon this year.
Sure. That's
if things go as planned.
Right. And that's just 2 months from now. I'm going to pivot to a degree here. I hope this does not sound trite. The political reality in all of this is that this site in northeastern North Carolina in the town of Winton is also in the congressional district of Don Davis, a Democrat seeking re-election in a redrawn seat, now more favorable to a Republican candidate. How does that factor in here? And what does Representative Don Davis have to say about this?
Yes, that is such a great question. You should be an assigning editor, actually, because I think that's something that a lot of reporters will be looking at. I mean, gosh, I'll say to start, I didn't get a chance to speak to Davis or Buckhout for this story. So I don't know how they feel about this quite yet. However, I think just looking at things, it's already quite divisive, this facility, right? I mean, in town, one can expect that reactions to it will be pretty mixed in North Carolina for sure. And this district is the only swingish district in North Carolina, despite Republicans carving it out to be more friendly to them last year for Buckhout. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the candidates navigate this. I mean, they're both quite moderate, both of these candidates. And the immigration is still an issue that a lot of people care about. A lot of folks still want secure borders and support the president's push to crack down on immigration, on illegal immigration. At the same time, I think there's plenty of folks who don't like how the administration has gone about doing that. I think many people view it as quite aggressive. And if this detention center starts having some problems, or if there's a lot of ruckus about it that builds over the next few months, I think that'll certainly factor into that race.
Again, just to run it back, Don Davis, the Democratic incumbent, and Lori Buckhout, the Republican challenger in this first congressional district race for North Carolina. Let me go broad here in our final moment, Eduardo, if you'll indulge me. I'm wondering what recourse states have, if any, in instances like this. I can't help but think of the 10th Amendment, federalism. Is this all permissible? Do we know? Does permissibility even matter here?
Good question. I'll tell you, one way to answer that maybe is by looking at the county. When I spoke to a county commissioner there, he emphasized over and over again, and other commissioners have emphasized the same point at meetings, that this is a privately owned facility and the county has no say in this. Despite people being really upset about it, they continue to insist that they can't do anything about it. Not only can they not do anything about it, but they're not really in on the know on what's happening. At least that's what this commissioner has been telling me. And so, broadening that out to the state, I'm not sure how much they can do. Even if Democratic Governor Josh Stein, who did not respond to his request for comment, even if he didn't support this or didn't want this, I'm not sure the General Assembly would be willing to work with them on stopping this, because of course the Assembly is controlled by Republicans, who you would think would be supporting this. So I'm not sure what all can be done, which I think was part of what was attractive to ICE opening up in this so-called detention desert, is because perhaps it was perceived as a friendly spot to get such a center running.
Eduardo Medina covers the South for the New York Times. Fittingly, he is at an airport right now, joining us on the line, flying from one southern destination to another. Eduardo, thank you for joining us here on the Friday News Roundup.
Thank you guys so much. It was great.
All right, back live now with Danielle Battaglia, Zachery, Eanes, Ely Portillo, and Colin Campbell. This story that we were just speaking about out of the New York Times was published yesterday. There might not be a whole lot here, but is there anything that you all want to add from a contextual standpoint from what we've heard? I'm going to turn to Ely and a related ICE Charlotte story in a moment, but is there anything as you kind of pick up the pieces here that you want to offer? And it's okay if not.
This is going to be a thorny issue, I think, for Don Davis in particular, but maybe for the governor as well. Is ultimately this is an area of the state that really desperately needs more jobs, and that's what this will bring, among other things. So I think there's going to be maybe some reticence, and you kind of see that with the reaction to the New York Times reporting to really speak out against it. But at the same time, there's I think even within this community a pretty big groundswell of people who just don't want to have ICE detaining people in their backyard.
Right.
And then you have the issue of the prisons. If they're going to pay more at this prison, does that pull people from nearby state-run prisons? This is just down the road from that Martin and Bertie County facility where there was a inmate uprising that I think resulted in some injuries a few weeks back because they didn't have enough staff. So if a lot of those employees then go work for this new ICE facility, then that's going to be a big problem for the state and locals.
Now, I mentioned this during the conversation with Eduardo, but I'll bookend it here now before it drifts too far away from my ears and y'all's. More than a third of North Carolina jails have exceeded capacity this year. According to a report published this week by North Carolina Health News, 19 North Carolina jails have operated above capacity each month in 2026. Sheriffs and jail administrators say the cause is due to changes in pretrial release rules as well as prison transfer delays. Per North Carolina Health News, the jail population in our state reached a 2-year high in April. Meanwhile, on the immigration front, a multi-million-dollar lawsuit was filed this week. It follows previous action by the federal government in our largest city. 2 women arrested during the so-called Operation Charlotte's Web last fall are seeking damages. Ely, details, please.
So these 2 women were filming ICE operations, taping them with their cell phones, and ICE agents began following them and eventually followed them to their residential neighborhood in Charlotte. Tatiana Rossini and Kristen Roos, they were in their car when they got boxed in by the agents in a driveway, and they were forcefully removed from this car. Agents actually used their rifles to smash out the windows and open the car and pull them out. This got a lot of attention because there was a viral video shot by one of their neighbors that was on CNN and all over the internet. They have said that they were wrongfully detained and that ICE agents broke the law in their detention, that they weren't doing anything wrong, and they're seeking $2.5 million. Now, they were charged with assaulting a federal officer, but the U.S. Attorney's Office dismissed those charges.
Right.
So, like a lot of these cases where activists have been arrested and accused of, using vehicles as a weapon, things like that, once they actually got to court and got beyond the arrest, the case just kind of fell apart.
The New York Times had some good reporting recently about the vast majority of these cases unraveling in court because there has not been evidence, there has not been corroboration. This is not a one-off. There have been claims that have come from ICE, but then the video evidence has not been backed up. Let me ask you this, Ely. These 2 women who were initially arrested, were they injured in any way?
They were not injured physically, but they claimed that, they were threatened. Agents were pointing assault rifles at them through their car windows and then using those rifles not even butt end first, actually with the business end first, smashing out the car windows while they were just sitting in the car. So they're accusing federal agents of violating their constitutional rights and of using excessive force and subjecting them to false arrest.
All right. We'll continue to follow that one. Let me work in the trivia question here before I forget so that you have an opportunity to reply to Due South at WUNC.org and get yourself a snazzy Due South mug. Name the North Carolina-made hot sauce that was originally produced for barbecue. Don't chirp it out here in the room, please. Again, name the barbecue-turned hot sauce made right here in North Carolina. A couple more minutes before break here. Let me turn to Wake County, the most populous county in our state. It is moving to end the posting of online mugshots.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really interesting development here in the largest county in the state. Because, there has been a proliferation around this. I think as news outlets, from TV stations to newspapers, a lot of people have reckoned over the past decade or so about whether we should automatically post mugshots online. Because, a lot of these people who are arrested are not guilty. Some of them are, obviously, but some of them aren't. And these mugshots do not disappear from the web very easily.
They don't.
And this is part of an effort. This is a law passed in 2020 called the Second Chance Act that would sort of automatically expunge people's records if, they were found to be not guilty. It was not an automatic process before. You'd actually have to go petition the court. So this is actually kind of related to that. But you can go on Facebook right now and there are accounts that just post
every day.
Every day.
All the Wake County arrests from
it doesn't matter
yesterday.
if it's a felony, if it's a misdemeanor, if it's a charge that gets dropped or dismissed 2 days later.
If it's two women in Charlotte who were doing things well within their First Amendment rights but were arrested at the, yes.
Right, and I think you'll find a lot of counties don't have, not every county does this. Some counties do post this. This was, honestly, Wake County did it because of this, $1 tabloid that used to be published called The Slammer, was just hitting them with so many records requests that they were doing this. So now that they're moving to this policy that you have to go in person to the courthouse to get these records, much more, a lot harder of a process here. Though, I will say some press rights activists, do think this is kind of a, while news outlets like WUNC, Axios, or News and Observer probably have discretion over which ones we post.
Right.
I mean, should people have the right? These are public records.
And they, just to be clear, they're going to remain public records. They're just the county, the public entity, is not going to post them online.
That's right. You have to actually go in person. So there's a lot more legwork now.
Yeah. But a lot less of these are going to show up on Facebook and Google results when you Google someone who got arrested 2 years ago and later had the charges dismissed. Sometimes that's their top search when they're trying to get a job.
Yeah.
Due South Friday News Roundup. We've got about 20 more minutes in the queue for you. We'll get a preview of what the honorables might be up to at the General Assembly next week. Stay with us. This is Due South on WUNC News. Welcome back to listener-supported WUNC News. It's Due South Friday News Roundup. Sebastian Aho has birthday candles this weekend. The Finland-born hockey forward has been with the Carolina Hurricanes for a decade, during which time he has been honored as an NHL All-Star 3 times, and of course just last month became a Stanley Cup champion. Sebastian Aho turns 29 on Sunday. Meanwhile, we learned this week that the Canes will have a new home next season, a new broadcasting home, that is. The Champs plan to produce their own TV broadcasts for the upcoming season. Unclear for now where it will be distributed and how much it might cost us. Also on the sports front, the Carolina Panthers were back on the field this week. There is still a professional football team in Charlotte. Ba-bumch. I got to stop making that joke every year, but I do. I'm sorry. Eli is here. Eli, remind us what the Panthers are back on the field. It's July 24th. What's going on?
Yeah, well, they are back and doing their starting training camp and starting on-field practice. They actually will be opening the preseason with an August 6th game. There's, the first annual game at the Hall of Fame in Canton. So they've got that looming, and they're trying to get an early start. But they've unfortunately already lost one promising player on the first day. 21-year-old pass rusher Nick Scorton, a second-year linebacker who the team had high hopes for, tore his ACL apparently during the team's first training camp practice yesterday. So, they're hoping to repeat a playoff run, but not an auspicious start so far.
Yeah, it's an ominous start. As you note, Eli, Panthers managed an 8-9 record last year, but won the NFC South, got into the playoffs. What is the educated forecast for the Carolinas NFL team this year?
Well, I think a lot of it is going to come down to how Bryce Young does and if he can really be good Bryce, because there were a few games where, he was average to not great and didn't do a lot. But then there were a few games last year where he was the difference maker, and he was unquestionably the player who won the game for them. So if they get good Bryce, difference maker Bryce, they'll be a lot better off. The other thing that the team is really looking forward to on the business side is a stadium renovation that this week they announced would, because Tepper, the owner, Tepper Sports and Entertainment, is putting more money into it, will now be over a $1.3 billion project. So that's going to take over the next few years, but the Panthers are already really publicly touting this project for the stadium in Charlotte. And just yesterday night, David Tepper, the owner, was on a podcast, I believe, with Roger Goodell, NFL commissioner, asking for and publicly making the pitch for a Super Bowl and NFL draft in Charlotte. So we'll see. On the field or off the field, they're trying to make some waves.
I don't have any issue with somebody taking a big swing. That feels like a very big proverbial swing. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the NFL draft nor a Super Bowl has ever taken place. Neither has ever taken place in Charlotte or anywhere in North Carolina.
Correct. And, the Super Bowl typically is going to domed stadium these days or really fair weather stadiums in the absence of it. We can have dicey weather here in February.
Oh, we sure can.
We will not have a dome even after this $1.3 billion stadium renovation. So, we'll see. But the
Ice Bowl Super Bowl would be fun to watch, though.
Oh, I would love that.
Ice storm.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be a blast.
Because Charlotte and that time of year, you could get an ice storm.
We did this year. Let's do it.
It'd be wicked comfortable from my couch. Okay. Due South Friday News Roundup. Let's talk hot sauce. Texas Pete, Winston-Salem produced, is, as a matter of fact, the answer to our trivia question. So we say congratulations to Michael in Raleigh. He's our winner. But we're talking about Texas Pete, the Winston-Salem produced hot sauce. Once upon a time, it was a barbecue jam. But we're talking about it because you went to the factory recently in Winston, which sounds like a fun assignment.
Yeah, I wanted to go down there just because Texas Pete's one of the 5 best-selling hot sauces in the country now. And I don't think many people realize it's made in North Carolina literally because of the name.
Right,
because I think it's a family-run organization. They don't do a ton of marketing around this. Right. The Garner family is now in their 4th generation of running this. Mm-hmm. The factory is on their old homestead north of downtown Winston.
I didn't know.
Are they worried that their street cred in Texas could be harmed by not being in Texas?
It's really funny. They actually, they're not very popular in Texas. They view this as a growth market for them because of the name. I was like, where do you guys sell? Like Southeast, they dominate, but they're like, the Midwest is not a very big hot sauce area, but we're looking at Texas and the West Coast as these growth areas. It's interesting to watch this. There's like a bunch of people roaming around. Like your face is hit by this pepper aroma. Your sinuses open up.
I was gonna ask that.
Yeah, there's peppers come in by train from New Mexico every day. Basically, it's a whole.
As hot sauces go, Texas Pete is, and I like Texas Pete, but it's not that hot as hot sauces go.
Well, that's what I was talking about. I was like, they basically said in the past 10 years, the hot sauce section of your grocery store has become the Wild West. People's taste buds, as they've had more experience, as the country's become more diverse, have really, blown up. Like sriracha now is like one of the best-selling hot sauces in the country.
But is that a hot sauce?
Well, that's the thing. It's it's all relative at the end of the day, right?
Fair.
But it's like, but in the world where the hot ones gets celebrities to do the bomb. Texas Pete probably does feel a little bit milder. But as you noticed, it was originally for barbecue and was almost called Mexican Joe.
Oh, interesting. What is y'all's hot sauce of choice?
None of the above. Usually, I'm
right.
very
not a hot sauce guy.
Go to a Asian restaurant. I would like that mild, please.
Okay. Yeah, I was at a friend's house recently, and they had hot sauces, a bunch to try, and someone was like, "Oh, try this one. It's like being pepper sprayed. It's so hot." And I'm like, "What? That sounds awful."
Hey, somebody punch me in the face. That would be great today. Like, what? Okay. Danielle, you're also looking at me like I'm nuts. And you're
No, I think I'm nuts. Taco Bell.
Fire sauce, little packets.
Actually, having visited the factory, it did make me want
cyclosporiasis.
to have Texas Pete a little bit more.
Say that one more time, Jeffrey.
After visiting the factory and seeing, my fellow North Carolinians make this, it made me want to have it a little bit more, I'll say.
I do like that they're home of hot sauce and donuts.
Yeah.
Those are a weird mix.
And they don't go together.
Have they mixed them before?
Someone at the
I feel
state
like
fair
they-
has probably done that.
I know. I feel
but
like they had to.
I will say, interesting comparison though. Krispy Kreme sold out to private equity, much less of a presence in Winston than they were, and Texas Pete's still owned by this family. Like, will that continue going forward?
And yet people think that Krispy Kreme is more of a North Carolina staple than Texas Pete is, I think.
Is there a Pete in the family?
It was the nickname for one of the sons, whose name was not Pete. His name was Harold, but he went by Pete. Didn't make sense to me, but
That
that's
sounds like
how
a
it
little
happened.
brother who couldn't maybe pronounce something. Winston-Salem was also the home of Haynes, the Haynes Corporation.
Oh, that's right, they
originated
are.
in Winston-Salem. Yeah. All right, we've got a few more minutes, couple of news briefs, and then we're going to turn to the legislature. Recent rains have lifted all Triangle counties out of the exceptional drought category. That's the most severe of the 4 categories. About a quarter of our state remains in extreme drought, including Durham, Orange, and Cumberland counties. With a week to go, July is now the wettest month Central North Carolina has seen since September 2024. Greensboro City Council members have voted against a moratorium on data centers. The narrow 5-4 vote on Wednesday came as council heard from a consultant about economic benefits and other impacts of a would-be data center. That included the increased demand of electricity and water use. And UNC Chapel Hill has been selected for a military fellowship. The Defense Department announced that Carolina is one of 2 schools after Secretary Pete Hegseth previously moved to bar military officers from attending graduate programs at several elite universities, including Harvard, Princeton, Yale, and Brown. In a statement, Lee Roberts, UNC chancellor, said in part, quote, "The program fits well within the context of our mission of service, and we take tremendous pride in our deep, long-standing relationship with the United States Army," close quote. All right, North Carolina General Assembly gavels back in next week. What should we expect?
Not a whole lot. They set this as the date to come back and finish up anything they didn't get done before they adjourned back at the beginning of the month. But we found out this week that the Senate plans to come back next week. The House has some scheduling conflicts, so they've decided to postpone another week for when they come back. But when we see a Senate session coming up in the early days of next week, we could see potentially a veto override of the last remaining diversity, equity, and inclusion ban bill. This one banning DEI programs and policies in state agencies. That's something that the House has already taken a vote on. The Senate needs to pick a day when they have 30 Republicans in the room to override the governor's veto on that. And the other big pending thing we have, which seems to be more pending on the House side, so probably waiting another week on this, is the legislation to regulate hemp products and how those are sold around the state. So big things to watch in the coming weeks.
And remind us, on the hemp front, there's a looming deadline at the federal level, and they have to act, or we expect them to act?
We expect that. It's not really related to the federal action.
Okay,
the federal action could change the hemp regulatory landscape even further, but this is sort of the state's attempt to try to have some sort of regulatory structure so that 13-year-olds aren't going and buying products and gummies that can get them high.
It feels like the 4th year in a row we've talked about that story, too.
It's this thing where it's like the legislature agrees that they should do something. They have yet to actually successfully do something that they all agree to.
Is there any sense that, they're closer to actually passing something now?
Well, we have a conference report, which is an agreement between the House and Senate that has already passed the Senate. The House left town without taking action, saying they wanted more time to review it a few weeks ago. So when they come back in the first week of August, that's something we could see some action on.
All right. A few more minutes here with Danielle, Zachery, Ely, and Colin. You want to chime in there?
I was just going to say, it sounds very much like Congress.
Well,
going home.
Good.
Not knowing what they're doing.
Or not good.
Not sure when they're going to come back. It's a fun place to schedule your life around.
They did, to tip the cap to some degree. Lawmakers did pass a state budget recently. It took about 1,000 days longer than it should have. But you wrote this week that, Colin, about some delays in state employees receiving raises and bonuses. that were part of that recently enacted budget. What's going on there?
Yeah, so if you were expecting that because the budget is now law, that these 3% raises, these bonuses that range between about $1,000 and $1,700 were going to show up pretty much immediately for state employees, not so much because the way particularly the bonuses are structured, those won't go out at the legislature's request until late September. So if you're looking for that bonus to fund your state employees' summer vacation, you're going to have to wait on that. On the raises front, because the bill was signed late enough in the month that they couldn't really process it in time, the raises are going to kick in mid to late August for most state employees. UNC system employees, which full disclosure includes us, get them at the end of this month because they were able to process it faster.
Interesting. And are these normal protocols, or is this a slower than usual rigmarole?
Normally the budget will get passed before the end of the fiscal year, and then there's more time to kick it in for July. The bonuses were specifically in the budget bill written in to come in as close to October as possible, which the State Employees Association thinks is political. The idea that if you give state employees a bonus right before Election Day, they might be more inclined to reelect you than otherwise. I asked Senate Leader Phil Berger's office about this. They said it was more of a processing thing for why they wanted to have the raises take effect and then wait a little bit longer on the bonuses.
All right. Let's get an update now, totally different gear here, on Chuck Edwards, Republican congressman from North Carolina, the 11th Congressional District. Listeners will remember that he is under an ethics probe by the U.S. House pertaining to sexual harassment. This week we got an update on the Edwards front. What is it, Danielle?
So 3 different updates.
Excuse me. We have 3 different updates, Danielle.
All on Chuck Edwards. I reported that he's officially declared that he hired a lawyer to represent him in this case. I think he spent about $40,000, something like that.
Can't use campaign money for that, or can
you?
You
can use campaign money for that.
Okay.
Yeah, there was I think it was a 1997 ruling by the FEC that makes it acceptable to defend yourself for ethics complaints with campaign money. I'm not sure how that translates, but it does. Okay. But more interesting, Axios reported this week that Chuck Edwards is now thought to have bought his employees pink and blue guns and had one serenaded at her birthday party with an Ed Sheeran song. So this just adds to the layers of weird things that have happened with his employees that the ethics committee
is he going to their bachelorette parties or something? Like, how does this even come about?
I went to gender reveal. I thought, are we dealing with a gender? Bang,
a lot of people have said that to me since the story came out, like pink and blue. One was pink, one was blue. One went to one employee, one went to the other.
Rifles, handguns, blue.
I assumed handguns, but I don't know.
They're handguns.
They are handguns.
Yes.
That sounded like a Dr. Seuss book. One was pink, one was blue.
One went bang and one went boom. I'm sorry. You set me up with Dr. Seuss.
I hope they did not.
Okay. More functionally with Edwards, who's in a re-election bid, this is a favorable Republican seat. If he were to lose, that would signal catastrophe for Republicans come November. What's next in this Edwards saga, if there is a...
I think that the campaign is hoping they get through this ethics investigation prior to the election. I would understand why they hope that happens, although... So far, it's not looking good. Not looking good for him with the investigation. I will say his campaign is defending him, saying, we live in District 11, so what that we bought guns? That plays to our base.
To the constituency.
So they're not mad about it. But, we are coming up on this election. Jamie Ager, who is running against him as the Democrat, is really far outspending him or outfunding him and bringing in money. I think there is concern with Republicans on whether Chuck Edwards can pull off a win. He is in a very Republican-safe district. So him overcoming Edwards would be a feat.
But Democrats seem to really think this district's in play.
They do.
And if you have this drip, drip, drip of this ethics investigation where you get one kind of eye-popping story every month or so, that really hurts his campaign.
Yeah. And
sometimes I almost feel like they're more confident about Ager than they are Don Davis, which I find surprising.
I would say that's plausible.
Very interesting. I am about out of time, but I'm going to just turn to Ely Portillo because he's on the line. And I want to ask you, Eli, 30 seconds or so, what is something that you are tracking in the week ahead?
Right now, we're looking to see what happens with this ICE facility that we talked about earlier. There's been a lot of concern from Charlotte advocacy groups and immigrant advocates who we started hearing from after that New York Times story came out. People are really worried and hoping that this doesn't presage a new Charlotte's Web type operation.
Ely Portillo, executive editor at WFAE, Charlotte's NPR member station. What the hey, let's do it quick. What else is on the horizon?
I'm making my legislative return this week to cover the GovOps meeting where they will be looking at the prison releases under Governor Roy Cooper during COVID.
You bring in your pink or your blue suitcase? Don't answer that.
We already talked about it. I was going to bring up this hemp legislation just because there are a huge proliferation of businesses out there that are actually having to make decisions here, in the next coming months, like whether they're going to make their next round of THC seltzers or not.
Right.
Sticking with the legislative theme, we could see potentially a veto override in the coming weeks on this bill that would ban homelessness encampments in different cities across the state, a fairly hot-button issue and one of the only vetoes from the governor issued this year so far.
If it happens in the days to come, we'll bring it to you next week here on the Due South Friday News Roundup. For Danielle, Zachery, Colin, and Eli, and everybody here at Due South, my name is Jeff Tiberii. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you Monday at noon.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. Follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.